Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Have a Life Teaching podcast, the podcast that hopes that you as educators will get some great tips that you could bring back into your teaching or in your management. One of the things that has become very apparent post-pandemic is the fact that our students are struggling socially, emotionally, mentally, and this really shouldn't come as a surprise since I think COVID exacerbated tensions that were already there in our society, even for adults. This means that as educators, we really have to not only be thinking about how we're teaching content, but how also we're helping students to grow emotionally and mentally. With that in mind, I'm very excited today to have as our guest, Bridget Durkan Laird. She is CEO of Wings for Kids, which is an organization based out of Charleston, South Carolina, doing a lot of social emotional work throughout the South and also nationally in cities such as Atlanta, Charleston, and Columbia, South Carolina. Bridget, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Bridget, one thing I like to ask everyone when they come on this show is tell us a little bit more about you, Wings for Kids, and how social emotional learning became your cause célèbre, if you will.
Sure thing. So we're actually 27 years old and I've been there 25 years. So it has been really my career. My whole adult life has been dedicated to Wings. And we were founded with the intention to teach social and emotional learning. So 27 years ago, not a lot of people were talking about it, but our founder was actually at a place in her life where she felt like she was missing something and she couldn't quite place what it is. She had a successful career. She was doing well professionally, but there was just something missing. And after doing a lot of reflection and thinking about things, she ended up picking up the book Emotional Intelligence and was like, you know what, this is what I'm missing. So she decided to start a nonprofit dedicated to helping kids get those skills before they were adults. So our very first mission was to help kids live more joyfully, powerfully, and responsibly before the time they're teenagers. And that really is, and at the time it was emotional intelligence, but social and emotional learning became the term used in education. So we really have only been thinking about social and emotional learning for 27 years. And we've done it in a variety of ways, but our gold standard program is after school programs, where we had a lot of room for creativity, evaluation, and just kind of having the freedom to design our own program. And with after school, we use that as a segue to in school and other partnerships, and just always having the thought that head smarts are important. So everything you get in school in terms of head smarts are important, but heart smarts are just as important. And that's what Wings is all about, heart smarts.
Now, I'm glad that you actually said that, Bridget, because recently on another show, we had a guest speaking about tutoring programs being provided for students either before school or after school, talking about this concept of after-school programming, particularly for students in communities at risk, which I believe is a large part of the communities you serve. Do you bring in social emotional learning into these heart smart programs that you run?
Well, I think the great thing about the after school environment is there's a lot of natural opportunity to bring these skills in. So you have kids on the playground running around, you have kids doing team games where they have to interact and communicate. You have sort of fun things going on. There's a lot of mentoring with after school counselors. And the way that we do it is we actually have sort of an anchor of language. We call it our words to live by. And it's a 5 stanza poem that the kids say every single day within the program. And each stanza within that poem represents one of the components of social and emotional learning. So we use that as our anchor, and then we work it in. If I can control myself, I'll have much better days, is the self-management line of words to live by. So you might walk in the program and see them playing a game around having to focus, because one of the things we teach is how to focus. And what we use for focusing is using your eyes, ears, and energy. So you might see a basketball game going on, having a lot of fun. Someone gets to the foul line, and where are your eyes? Your eyes have to be on the hoop, not, searching the stands
Right.
for your girlfriend or boyfriend. Your ears have to be blocking out that noise of, what, somebody's yelling, miss it, but I need to concentrate. And your energy is on following through rather than thinking about how the ref has made so many bad calls this game. You're having this coach and this mentor that's bringing that into all aspects of the program. Homework, that's easy. Your eyes are on the paper, your ears are blocking out that kid next to you that's like, what did you get for number 5? What did you get for number 5? And your energy isn't on flipping your pencil up and down. Your energy is on doing the work. It's really just almost sneaking opportunity into natural moments that happen every day. And a lot of that is through professional development with the adults that work within the program. They have to know how to do that naturally. So we spend a lot of time on training as well.
You mentioned focus as being one of those skills, and you provided some great examples of how to bring focus into everything we do as adults, and in your case, working with students. In addition to focus, what are the other tenets of your after school programming?
So we really have the 5 components, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. And again, that poem is focusing on each of those lines. So for example, self-awareness is, I love and accept who I am on the inside and know my emotions are nothing to hide. So that's another important piece, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and understanding it's okay to have a full range of emotions, but just how you handle those emotions is important. Or for example, another one is, I understand others are unique. I want to learn more about everyone I meet. I want to step into their shoes and see what they are going through. That's that empathy piece. So, and that's a huge piece of our program, really trying to understand how others feel and finding ways to understand that. So, if you see someone sitting in the corner and their face is sort of withdrawn and they're curled up and looking a little bit sad, you would put together and say, that kid right there could use a friend. And maybe I'll go over to and I'll introduce myself, because it doesn't look like they're having a great day. And it would be a great thing for me to try to help them have a good day. So I might say, hey, I'm Bridget. And you're like, I'm John. I'm brand new to the school. But you want that kid that can recognize that, rather than honestly just kind of walking by, because you're not really thinking about it. We want kids to recognize and understand others and how they might be feeling, and finding ways to connect and help them.
So there were 2 things you said there, Bridget, that really resonated with me. And whether or not we're talking about an after school program or actually in school learning, I think the 2 things that resonated with me that you mentioned are important in both, important throughout education. And the 2 are how to handle our emotions, how to express our emotions, but how to handle them, and then how to show that empathy. I imagine you work with many adults who are providing these programs, these after school programs to students. How do you train your staff to help students surface emotions in a positive way and to develop the sense of empathy that you're talking about?
It's interesting that you point out the adults, because it starts with the adults, because a lot of the adults that we begin working can't do that themselves.
Exactly.
They don't necessarily have the most empathy, and they sometimes can't control or express their emotions. So we really start with that piece first, helping the adults understand what social emotional learning is, and even going through some exercises with them to say, here are some ways that you can work on these skills. I think that helps because they're working on it themselves, so they know how that feels. So when they're working with the kids, they can transfer some of what they've learned. And within the program, what happens is a true mentorship happens because they're together 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. That's a lot of time together. And so it really is reliant on that adult saying, here we have a safe, trusting place to build this relationship. And here are some ways that I can help you think about what emotions you're feeling, think about how you can express. And again, we do it through these little lingo, fun things that the kids sometimes, it's not like, hey, let's sit around and talk about our emotions. And that sounds fun. It's really like bringing in fun words and utilizing kind of engaging tactics so that the kids are actually having fun too. You wouldn't believe it, but there is a lot of fun that goes on in the program. I'd say 95% is just crazy, engaging fun.
No, it sounds it, especially if students are having options to play sports and do other creative artistic activities. I would say that fun is built into this. You mentioned a couple of key strategies or activities you use with adults to help them get in touch with their own emotions, and then how to help students express those emotions and feel that empathy. Could you describe maybe 1 to 3 of those strategies or activities you use? Because I think that might even be useful to teachers in the classroom to know.
I think, again, you take a component of social and emotional learning and then we bring it down. So relationship skills. One of the things that relationship skills is we really focus on the words support and trust. We work a lot on what does it look like to be a supportive friend? What are things that you can do that make your friend feel good? And then that trusting side, how can you maintain trust? What are things that you can do? And we'll do team building activities that focus on that, not a classic trust fall, because some of those have gone wrong, right? But something like that, where it's really beginning to develop what does trust look like. I think that's an important one. Responsible decision making is another one. We focus a lot on taking accountability for decisions that you make. And we have something called share your ID. That means sharing what you did. What did I do, as opposed to constantly blaming others. So, I mean, in the adult world, you're late for a meeting, right? What's the first thing that most people say? Sorry, there was a lot of traffic. Well, actually, you're not taking accountability. You're blaming the traffic. What did you do? I didn't leave my house in time. I didn't think about that it was Monday morning and 8:30 was going to be very trafficy. So I'm late for the meeting. Same thing with kids. You got someone throwing sand in the sandbox because they lost their temper. First thing they do is, John called me a name. Well, no, this isn't about John. What did you do?
Right.
I lost control of my emotions. I threw sand in the sandbox. So I think it's just about guiding the kids through some of those decision-making and thinking processes that help.
In terms of the after-school activities that you do and the programming that you run, what do you see going really, really well in this program? And where is there an opportunity for schools to do after-school programming better?
Well, I think that it's kind of twofold. We do want to continue to see this in after-school programs, that after-school programs a lot are focused on a little bit less structure because there's not a lot of necessary guidelines. So having people understand that bringing in social and emotional learning doesn't mean taking away the fun or taking away that freedom that a lot of after-school programs experience. But I also think it's important to figure out how to bring it into the school day where it doesn't feel cumbersome or too much. You know, a lot of teachers have so much to handle and they might say something like, we don't have time for social and emotional learning. But if you're doing it in a way that just sort of looks at the culture in the classroom, then it's not actually adding anything. It's just a layer that you can put on there to help the classroom and the kids collaborate and have this piece. So I think we really want to think about ways to help teachers understand it's really not that heavy of a lift to bring the social and emotional learning piece in.
Could you give a specific example of how to do that, perhaps in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is 5 minutes at the beginning of the day, setting a learning objective that's around social and emotional learning. So you might say, hey, today we're going to work on empathy, and I'm going to give a shoe sticker to anybody that I see that is stepping into the shoes of others. What does that mean? That means recognizing that John is from a different type of family than you. You have 5 brothers and sisters, John has. just as mom, no brothers and sisters. So if I find you having a conversation with John saying, tell me a little bit more about your mom and how it is to live in your household, then I might give you a shoe sticker for empathy. And you can do that during recess. You can do it during lunch. We can do it when we're working in math groups. Actually, math is one of my strengths, or I might say math is one of my weaknesses, but it seems like one of your strengths. Tell me a little bit more about how you got so good at math. Here's your shoe sticker. So it's not necessarily let's sit around and do this for 30 minutes. It's a quick, hey, today's shoe sticker day. This is what empathy is. And let's see who can earn the most shoes. Just little things that are easy and to bring in.
I like how you said that, because I've seen elsewhere where teachers have talked about, or I've seen strategies where at the end of a lesson, students shout out their other student or their other classmates in a positive way for doing or exhibiting those healthy social emotional characteristics that we want displayed. Because as you know, Bridget, teachers are old hat at positive narration. Oh, I really like how Johnny is waiting for me to get ready and they have their notebook out to go. We could be doing very similar things in terms of promoting those life skills,
right?
Those social emotional life skills, along with the content that we're teaching. And as you were saying, that doesn't mean you're taking away from the fun. Actually, it's another level of student engagement, because you're getting your students thinking about not just that activity or not just that content that they're working on now, but a skill that they could derive from doing this activity that they could take with them for the rest of their lives, well beyond just the activity itself.
Right. And I think teachers would be surprised at how much connection just small things have with the students. One of my best friends is an English teacher for high school, and she knew what I did my whole life. We've been best friends our whole life. But she said something like, "Oh, my school wants to bring in social emotional learning. Can you give me a couple things to do?" And all she did was at the very beginning of her lesson on Fridays, she said, "Let's have a check-in of the emotion that everybody's feeling today." And that's all they did. And then they would maybe give a sentence to why they felt that emotion. And she did sort of a survey later on, and the kids were so excited about just that one thing. Like, it feels so good to have someone to talk to. It feels so great to have my emotions validated. And she was shocked. She was like, I wouldn't think that was something that would change the culture in my classroom, but it really did.
Nice to know that. Yeah. Kids are people, right? We all want to feel validated. We all want people to understand what we're going through. And to your point you made earlier, this is another great way of developing a relationship with the students that we're serving. And even our most challenging students can often self-regulate much better when they know that their teacher cares about them and is willing to invest the time to talk about them in addition to the content or the curriculum. Yes, right. As teachers, we have to make sure we get quote unquote through the curriculum. But I think what is sometimes lost, especially in our high stakes culture, in our testing culture, is that we really are teaching students and teaching people. It's really nice to hear that your colleague was able, and your friend was able, to bring in social emotional learning skills at such an elementary, simple level, so they weren't overwhelmed in doing it, but hearing the profound effect just even doing those simple things had on the lives of the kids in our classroom.
And I think that's one of the lessons we've learned. It really is pretty simple to make some pretty positive big changes in classrooms and programs. And as you referenced in the beginning, kids are really going through tough times right now. There's trauma out there, there's post-pandemic, and this classrooms have almost got more high stakes, right? We got to catch up. We lost 2 years of learning, but there's also 2 years of trauma. And if you don't deal with that, then the 2 years of learning just are going to be harder to catch up on.
It goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, where you have to have those basic needs met first before you could self-actualize or learn or synthesize information. So to your point, if students are experiencing trauma, we can't just let that sit. We do have to surface that. Exactly. And why wouldn't our students be experiencing trauma given everything that has happened in the last, say, 5 years. Again, as we were talking about before, you do a lot of your after school programming in communities at risk.
Yes.
So how would you say the last 5 years or trauma has affected the communities in which you're working, as opposed to communities that might have, let's say, more social and economic resources?
I think we found when we were working with our kids during the pandemic that a lot of our parents were still working. So there wasn't that opportunity to work from home and be side by side and do e-learning. Parents were leaving the house as
Right.
frontline workers, where the kids were alone a lot more often. And that sense of sort of isolation with our kids was at a high, and kind of feeling a little lost and not having the support for things like, just basic tutoring and math and that type of thing, because it was such a stressful time for the parents to be at their job. And I also think that on the flip side, a lot of our kids had siblings, younger siblings to care for. So it was hard to juggle. I mean, you're asking, a 10-year-old to juggle e-learning and helping a 4-year-old or maybe a 5-year-old with kindergarten, and maybe a 3-year-old just kind of managing that piece of the day. So, and it was just kind of what you had to do. There was no blueprint for how anyone handled this. And those kind of things are catching up with kids. And also school attendance, we noticed kids are still missing school because it became a little bit of a norm and a little bit more acceptable. After school, our kids would, before the pandemic, traditionally be there 99% of the time. They were not missing it. It was fun and it was engaging, but there, a lot of times we have parents have to pick up. And the thing that parents did learn in the pandemic was that sometimes it was okay to leave the kids home alone because they had to. So I just think that there are a lot of pieces of that puzzle that we had to put back together, and we're still sort of struggling with it.
So when you're partnering with, let's say, a district to bring in an after school programming, I'm not sure exactly what kind of part or what your partnerships look like. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and whether or not you do support districts. But when you are partnering with another organization or a school system, what do you try to set up right from the start to ensure that the after school programming will be quality?
Yeah, and that's after school program and classroom. So if we're partnering with a district, a lot of times we're doing work within the schools. And as we talked about earlier, we start with the adults. So we do a lot of professional learning with the adults that will be working with the kids, whether it's we start as high as the administrators of the school, and then the teachers, the guidance counselors, the after school program coordinators, the after school counselors. Start with the adults in a way that is, this is what social and emotional learning is. This is why it's important. Let's work on the skills within the adults. And then let's infiltrate that into the classrooms and the programs. And we do that with trying to determine ways to bring that simple SEL that we talked about, and strategies and ways to connect. And the nice thing is, because it can be so simple, it can be done pretty thoroughly and easy. And we've done this. We are in South Carolina, but we have partnerships in California, Wyoming, West Virginia, Michigan, Texas, where we really focus on that professional development piece. And then the second stage is resources and assistance to classrooms and programs. And we find that we're a little bit more we're almost consultative and collaborative to say, what is it that you need? And the number one thing that we look for in a partner is somebody that says, we want to bring in social and emotional learning because we care, because we know it's important. What is hard is if somebody just wants to check a box because it's something that they quote unquote have to do.
That makes sense to me. Bridget, would you mind sharing? You don't have to give any names, of course. Would you mind sharing a quick story about a partnership that you felt was really impactful and why?
Oh, sure thing. Actually, I will say a name because we've been partners with the YMCA of Metro Atlanta 3 years. We're heading into our third year. The Y, they really wanted to get aligned on ensuring that social and emotional learning was important at the administration and within the programs. So we've been doing that through a series of different professional development with their entire administration. and then bringing it down to the program director level, to the after school programs and the summer programs. And we actually had one of our sessions was 250 administrators, and they all walked through the words to live by and recited
Nice.
it, and kind of saying, okay, we are committed to this anchor of this language. And that's how our partnerships work. They came to us to say, we're really invested in this. We want this. Can we talk about how this would look? And we developed a 3-year plan with them.
When you say you developed a three-year plan, was that a plan to work with the administrators in running their programs, or was that a 3-year plan to run your after-school programs?
Their programs utilizing strategies and techniques from us. So not implementing a quote unquote wings program, but keeping the essence of their program, but having social emotional learning as a highlight. That's a 3-year partnership. We have plenty of partnerships that are just 1 year or even a few months, where we design almost like series of professional development, coaching visits, site visits, where we really can be hands-on. Right? What we don't want to be is just a curriculum that kind of sits on the shelf.
So now, Bridget, we've talked about a lot of things in a very short amount of time, but I'm sure I haven't asked, obviously, all the questions I could ask. What didn't I ask you that you want the listeners to know about SEL? Or
I think that most people are curious. You did cover this, curious to easy and simple ways to do the teaching and why it's important. If you're into social and emotional learning, you know the why, but the question is why. And we talked about, obviously you need heart smarts and this type of thing, but there are direct outcomes linked to academic performance when social and emotional learning is well developed. And we actually are kind of responsible for some of that research. We did a full randomized control trial back in 2011 to look at our program to say, wings kids versus non-wings kids, what are the benefits? And wings kids did do better in the classroom. They also behaved better in the classroom. And then they did develop these social and emotional skills. So maybe that's the question. Like, sure, it sounds good, but why? And the why is there's outcomes that you can point to that say this helps. Because again, teachers, it's high stakes. We want academic outcomes. But guess what? There is evidence to show that social and emotional learning supports the academic outcomes.
It's not surprising to me that students that have that self-advocacy or self-efficacy, if you will, are going to do better academically. It's all the more reason to bring in SEL. One, you could bring it in when you're having fun, but there are really demonstrable outcomes that could come from having fun and learning how to learn and learning how to self-regulate, which then go back into the academic. So I think this just really reinforces, Bridget, what you and I were already talking about how you can really be infusing SEL into almost everything we're doing when it comes to the teaching and learning of students.
Exactly. And I think that at the end of the day, kids will benefit. And, that's what we all want, right? We all want what's best for the kids.
Bridget, where can people find out more about you and your work at Wings?
Very easy. It's just wingsforkids.org, and we spell out for, so FOR, wingsforkids.org. It's really, you can find anything you want on that site. We try to make it pretty easy to navigate and have everything about us on there.
Thank you so much, Bridget, for your time today. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.